Nature is always showing us new possibilities, and these video artists, as citizen scientists, are finding ways to show us these new possibilities of getting us to pay attention and to see what and listen to what nature is telling us. So I live in a small, cozy apartment on the roof of a building, and my favorite thing about the place where I live is the patio. It's literally about the size of the rest of the apartment, and it's this quiet oasis where there's the back of buildings and then trees around, and yeah, it's just really lovely, really quiet, this little gem of nature in the city. Now, I think I'm not the only one that enjoys my patio. There's a lot of birds that visit my patio, even though it's a small space in the city. A lot of birds. I have this little office studio area where I work, and it's tucked right in the window with the patio wrapping around. So it almost feels like I'm working outside most of the time. And it's this perfect vantage point to be bird watching kind of simultaneously while I'm working. And really, there are a lot of birds. In one day, I think I can see more than 50 of them, and I know my relatives and friends always hear me talking about the birds that I saw. And it's not just crows and pigeons that we might expect to see in the city, but I've been having fun watching ravens and chickadees and sparrows and starlings, and I'm really excited about the pair of northern flickers that seem to come around. So needless to say, for the longest time, the platform of my patio was actually really hazardous. So it was just these wooden planks that were set up on a flat roof where the water pools. And so after many seasons of the rain coming, they were getting really soggy and rotting and cracking. And it was kind of walk out there at your own risk. And actually it was causing problems for my downstairs tenant because there was water leakage and things like that. So the building manager came and took a look at the patio and he said, "Looks like you got a whole ecosystem under there." Well, one summer, I went away for a weekend, and I came back, and the whole patio was redone. It was incredible. Like, all this brand new wood that's been treated, looks like it's going to last for a really long time. Lovely. And it was great. But a couple days later, I noticed that something else had changed. The patio environment was really quiet, and really still, and really empty. You see, sure, we fixed the patio, and now it kind of looks nicer, and it's a lot safer to walk on, and there's no more leaking on my downstairs neighbor's apartment. But did we ever stop to ask ourselves what the impact of that change was going to have on my feathered neighbors? So everything that we do is going to have some kind of an impact, one way or another, and the question is really, what kind of an impact is it that we're going to have? Over a decade ago, I was myself an undergraduate student at the Emily Carr University of Art and Design. At that time, I was learning to self-identify as an artist. How we self-identify, it can have a really big impact in terms of how we value ourselves and how we see our role in the world. Now, a couple years ago, I started teaching this community projects course at Emily Carr in partnership with the David Suzuki Foundation. And somebody started introducing me to someone else as an environmentalist. No one's introduced me yet as a scientist, but this evening, I'd like to argue that my students in the Rewilding Vancouver Community Projects course, through the process of creating these video art projects, are actually proving themselves to be citizen scientists. So what do I mean by video artists being citizen scientists? Well, okay, so there's lots of specializations in science and things like that, but I'm talking more generally in terms of how scientists, they go through this process of hypothesizing, inquiring, going out and exploring, experimenting, observing, documenting, and concluding. And in doing that, they find these new ways of showing us how to look at the natural world and our relationship with it. Well, in the very same way, you guys, my students, have gone out there and used the similar process, right? Of inquiring, hypothesizing, investigating, documenting, and concluding, and have also come up with a new way of showing us how to look at the natural world and our relationship with it. I came across a book in my research, and its title I thought was the perfect way of summarizing what it is that we're doing here. It's called Adventures of Perception, Cinema as Exploration. So one of the fantastic things that I've been observing again and again through this course is that as students are going through this process of making these videos and getting out there, they're starting to share some of their experiences, and I can see that they're also shifting the way that they're seeing the natural world. one of the requirements of the curriculum is that students they select a specific outdoor site that they go and build a relationship with by going and spending multiple site visits in that particular place. And so the first task is to go there with the camera lens, right? Looking at the site through the lens of the camera. And in doing that, they often start paying attention and noticing things that they might not have seen otherwise. So that's with the camera, first of all. The second thing is then going through the lens of our ears, actually, going with sound recording equipment and microphones. And repeatedly, students have reported that they start to hear things that they never saw. And then they kind of see them after hearing them. And then it doesn't matter how deep or large those green spaces are, even in the spaces where it seems like we're almost not in the city anymore, students have repeatedly reported the challenge in actually being able to record isolated sounds that have been, that are animal-generated or earth-generated without the interference of human-generated sound. So where we might think that something is really just a nice green space with no human interference, we're learning, and I quote Bernie Krause, the soundscape ecologist, who says, "Our ears can tell us a very different story." One of the other things that I think is really fascinating about this process is, especially when we're looking at how can we inspire ourselves and others to pay attention to nature more, is that in the process of creating site-specific outdoor multimedia projects, students have to start factoring in the natural elements of the world as part of their creative inspiration, but also some of the creative challenges that they have to work around. So an example of this would be in this particular project this year, we had students who had to really pay attention to the tide tables because they were maybe going to lose access to the last wild beach in Vancouver, the Point Grey foreshore. And we also had an unexpected snowfall that inspired some interesting ideas around the role of the seasons in food production at UBC Farm. So I want to go back now to that little story about my patio. For weeks and weeks, really, there were no birds, and I was pretty devastated. It was actually really hard to understand just that balance of having gotten this great new patio, but the loss that I also felt. But something else interesting happened. Because we interrupted the patio that year, I decided not to plant my garden in the spring. And so it was just sitting there, pots of soil kind of scattered around. But actually, without me doing anything, this wild garden started to emerge on the patio. And then before too long, it came. The very first bird ever since the transformation of the patio. And that first little chirp, it hit me with this gusto. It was like the first note of an orchestra that just is that foreshadowing of this enormous sound that's going to come. And soon, before too long, a whole bunch of birds have started to come back. And it's really exciting to see that there is a whole new life. So even though there was this ecosystem that was maybe underground, and that was taken away, given the chance, a new one is emerging. Nature is always showing us new possibilities, and these video artists, as citizen scientists, are finding ways to show us these new possibilities of getting us to pay attention and to see and listen to what nature is telling us. There's one other thing about this process which I find super exciting, and that's just, as I mentioned, students in the process, as they're starting to see the natural world in new ways and maybe looking at new roles that they might have in the world. There have been a number of students who have come through this program who have been activated to initiate their own projects using arts to really have an impact in terms of environmental issues. I'd like to give an example of a student from just last semester in the fall, Brenna Harker. She made a film about the Fraser River and described a real aha moment for her, which was when she ventured out beyond the industrialized area that she was very familiar with to a completely different part where she discovered that this completely other kind of look and feel that she felt was fairly pristine and described it as being beautiful, that completely contradicted her previous notions. And for her, that was the aha moment where the river became no longer something not even worth mentioning and instead something worth protecting. So much emotion. You know, Rena and her peers and the students in the program this year, although they may not yet self-identify as citizen scientists, they've definitely proven to me that they can show me and the rest of the community all sorts of ways of looking at the natural world in new ways and our relationship to it. And not only that, but also looking at new roles for artists in terms of the world and environmental issues. Thank you very much.